Watching Banfield starts now.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the program. Good to have you here. Let's just get to it, because I got a lot again tonight. Some of it, most of it, a lot of it coming from Oklahoma. I have been in a lot of courtrooms in my many years, dare say decades, of doing this job. And on occasion, they get ugly. It is real drama inside a courtroom. If you've not been in one, I highly recommend that you take some time to go in a courtroom and do jury duty. But man, things got ugly in Oklahoma today. And I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it, and I don't blame the families of those two Oklahoma moms who were savagely murdered on their way to pick up kids. Those four defendants who are accused of murdering these two women were marched one by one into an Oklahoma courtroom today. They were dressed as they should be, as defendants, in stripes and orange. They were shackled in bulletproof vests. And when they got into that courtroom, they had to face down the families of the victims they allegedly murdered in cold blood, to innocent mothers. In a moment, you're going to get a lot more color from that courtroom, and you're going to have to plug your ears for some of it. And there was potential violence, hence the vests and the snipers. Give you all that in a moment. Also want to tell you about another case in the Boston area. If you have not heard of the Karen Read trial, pull up a chair, pour yourself a bourbon. This one is incredible. 11 jurors have now been seated, and let me tell you, they're in for a big one. They're not yet at a full panel, but when they do get that panel, the evidence is going to fly, and the defense attorneys are going to step up to bat. Because the amount of debate over the evidence that the prosecutors have that Karen Read murdered her police officer boyfriend is more than I usually see. And again, I am inside a lot of courtrooms. Wait until you find out how this financial analyst and university professor is going to fight her case. And I'm just going to lay it on the line. She's got good odds. The weird part is that her defense is that the cops are corrupt and they framed her. That sounds far-fetched. Tonight, you're going to hear from a former DEA agent who's been watching this case for a year, and he says he's got the receipts that the cops lied. It's amazing. And then also Rex Heuermann, the Long Island serial killer suspect, was in court today. I'm usually kind of bored by some of these pretrial things. There's a lot of stuff that's just like scheduling and but not today. No, not today. There was just, an Everest's worth of discovery that was changing hands between prosecutors and defense attorneys. But even that wasn't the most amazing thing. What was the most amazing thing is a number. The number of electronic devices that the investigators took from Rex Heuermann. I had to rewind, and I had to look again, and then I had to Google to make sure that the broadcaster didn't make a mistake and add a number. That's how many. I'm going to tell you all of that in just a moment. Also, his wife's attorney is going to be with me tonight. Don't forget, she is divorcing him. But she's still showing up in court every day. Why? All that coming up in just a moment. First, though, Tiffany Adams. Tiffany Adams fully expected to be in court today. This date is actually probably circled on her calendar back at home, probably has been circled for months. But it was supposed to be a very different courtroom than the one she ended up in today. She was supposed to be in family court, fighting a custody hearing over her grandchildren, fighting the mother of those children. But instead, that mom was murdered, and Grandma Tiffany was shackled and led into criminal court wearing stripes and a bulletproof vest and charged with that murder and one more for good measure. And Grandma Tiffany and her braid, well, she had company. Her boyfriend, Tad Cullum, and another couple, Cora and Cole Twombly, good friends of theirs. Those other three were along for the arraignment, too. And as far as custody goes, oh yeah, that happened. Tiffany and her pals will be in custody for a while because the judge denied them bail. You know, being that first-degree murder and all that is pretty serious. And then there was something else that happened in that rural Oklahoma courtroom today that the 4 defendants might have anticipated was going to happen. And the rest of us maybe we should have anticipated it too. It was unbridled fury from the families of these 2 innocent murdered moms, Veronica Butler on the left and Jillian Kelly on the right. Not just angry words, and by the way, they're words I can't repeat, but there were also attempts by one of the victims' fathers to lunge at the suspects. NewsNation's national correspondent Brian Enton was right there, front row actually, for all of it. He joins me now live. Brian, you've had a hell of a day. I know that you expected it would be tense in that courtroom, but I'm sure you did not expect how intense it was going to be. And start from the beginning when you arrived and saw snipers on the roof.
Yeah, so this was a unique court experience. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like it in Texas County, Oklahoma, a small courthouse. We show up, and I immediately notice that there's sheriff's deputies everywhere, snipers up on the roof of the courthouse for security. There is a police drone in the air, Ashleigh, that they're flying over this small parking lot. They've got deputies out in the parking lot with those metal detector wands. And before you could go into the courthouse, right in the parking lot in the middle, you had to spread your arms. They checked you. Obviously, no electronics, no cell phones. I was wearing a hoodie. I couldn't even wear my hoodie. They said, you have to take your hoodie off and take it back to the car. I've never had that happen before. So finally get inside. We go up to the 3rd floor, small little quaint courthouse, very, very small courtroom. And that's when sort of the emotions just exploded, Ashleigh.
Okay, so now walk me through, again, a small courtroom and 4 defendants. Normally, you've got 1 defendant, and it's hard to fit people in a courtroom when it's a big media circus. But you guys, the media, were given the front row, which is very strange. We're usually pushed at least halfway back or to the back. Why were you all in the front row?
Yeah, so small courtroom, and the first thing I wondered was, this is interesting, I've never been allowed to sit in the front row before. I later realized it was actually a very good move by the court administration. So we sit down, they brought the suspects in one by one, so they didn't bring them all in at the same time, and they marched them right through the middle of this little courthouse, by the way. You saw they come out the front door, the video you're looking at, so there's no like back hallway or anything like that. So that was interesting. And they bring them in one by one, and there's about 24 family members of the victims in the back 2 rows, and it is just another level of emotion, sobbing, crying. And then when each person came in, they weren't yelling, but they were talking loudly enough for everyone to hear and directing things at the suspects during the court hearing. I've never seen it before. And I wrote down some of the things they said. When Cole Trumbley came in, Veronica's dad said, bastard, bastard. When Tad Cullum came in, they said, you are a sorry ass piece of you know what. I'm not going to say what they said, a bad word. And when Grandma Tiffany came in, they said, effing B-word who killed my daughter. And this is while the others are sobbing. And then at one point, not at one point, pretty much throughout the entire thing, it took about an hour for them to get through each one of the suspects. They had to hold Veronica's dad back. And it was his family members were literally holding on to each arm because he wanted to rush the suspects. And I guess it was just, I've never seen it before because normally when people get emotional in a courtroom, they will stop, the bailiff will say, everybody, we understand this is emotional, but, please. That didn't happen here. It just moved on.
I got to be honest with you. I feel like I would have done the same. I know courtroom protocol. Yeah. I know decorum, but I'm not so sure I could have held back. I think someone would have had to hold me back if someone had done that to my child. It is interesting, though, that you say nothing stopped them. Like the judge didn't say order in the court, bailiffs, please get the gallery under control. There was no attempt to sort of quell those actions.
No, I will say the deputies sort of gathered around that area where the victims' families were, so they were ready. I mean, if he was to get away from them holding him. But again, I think the judge felt it too. I mean, you just felt so deeply for these families, Ashleigh. The emotion, the sadness. I can't even really explain it. You could see it in their faces just how distraught they were. So maybe that's why the judge just sort of let it carry on. I mean, it was hard not to just feel bad for them.
I mean, just so heartbreaking in every respect. So, and also perplexing, just perplexing. So you said the dad, Veronica's dad, lunged at the defendants, and his sister, which would be Veronica's aunt, held him back. You met both of them, Veronica's dad and Veronica's aunt, outside the courthouse. What'd they say to you?
Yeah, so this sort of strange scene continued outside the courthouse because they basically kept everybody seated, and then they bring the suspects right out through the middle of the small courthouse, right out the front door, through the parking lot. The video you're looking at, they came in, they went out, and there was a crowd of people out there, local people watching, and there were also family members of the suspect out there. It was Tad's sister. I wrote down what she said. She said that he would never hurt a woman. She was screaming that outside while all of this was happening. And then the victims' families came out, and I spoke with Veronica's dad and aunt. Again, just feel terrible for them. This is some of what they said. Just that courtroom was so small. I can't imagine. You guys were just so close to them. I mean, what was that like?
You know, to hold my brother back from jumping, there's just too many emotions, so much anger. I don't understand how somebody can hate somebody so much that you want to kill him. My niece did not deserve that, and neither did the young lady with her. She was just there to help her. We didn't deserve this. Our family didn't deserve this.
She didn't deserve any of it, neither one of them.
Do you feel like the justice system failed Veronica?
They 100%.
Has it always been like this with Tiffany?
In the last 5 years, 100%, they have failed.
What would you say to the justice system?
They don't want to know. I don't have to get off here, sorry.
So he was obviously calmer outside, but Veronica's dad saying that they feel failed by the justice system because of the custody battle that's been ongoing, and they've been out of court for so long, and now they're in this position dealing with two murders.
Well, and Brian, they're going to be back in, likely next month. There's another hearing for these defendants next month, and my guess is that the emotions are so high they're going to be there every single time to see justice, carried out. So I want to skip ahead a little bit because those are the four who were arrested, but the arrest affidavits for every single one of them kept mentioning a fifth person who allegedly was involved in the crime, according to the 16-year-old daughter of the Twombleys, who said Paul Grice was part of the planning. Paul Grice was there at the murder scene. And yet Paul Grice is just, we can't find him anywhere. I will say this, though. And this was something that really caught my eye today. The Texas County Sheriff, his name is Matt Bull, and he told us earlier today, thank you, but no, I don't want to do an interview, he said, but he said, you can put this on air. Yes, we've made arrests, but that doesn't mean this investigation is over by any means. Brian, do you know anything about that fifth silhouette on the screen, the big question mark, Paul Grice?
Paul Grice, that's the big question, Ashleigh. Everybody wants to know where he is. And I'll tell you, people were quiet here, and they're still nervous to go on camera, but they're talking more now that the arrests have been made. They don't feel as intimidated because, so many of these people, including Grandma Tiffany, were powerful in this community. So they're talking a little bit more, and nobody seems to know where he is. No one. We've heard all sorts of rumors that he's left the state, that he's in protective custody. We haven't been able to confirm any of it, and we can't nail down where he is right now.
Okay, the other issue is the interview you did yesterday with the municipal court judge who's a friend of Tad Cullum, who was in Tad Cullum's house when the raid happened, who had guns pointed at him. You did an interview with him yesterday in which he said, I didn't know anything about this God's Misfits group. You went back, he was fired for doing the interview. And then you went back and spoke with him today. Tell me a little bit about what he said.
Yeah, he says he was forced to resign after we did the interview on your show, and the city officials saw it. They made him resign. He's got a lot of questions about why that happened. just kind of goes back to this whole secrecy thing here. Keep in mind, he's the judge in Kansas, not Oklahoma, so he's not connected to the case. He wasn't talking about the case at all. He doesn't understand why he's in trouble. And he shared some new details, too, things he hadn't told us before about Tad, which were very interesting. Listen to what he said, Ashleigh.
I was sitting here in the house, and I got a phone call. There was a city council meeting last night, and they said, you need to come over here. So I went over there. It's only a block. I walked over, and I went in, and they were in executive session. When it was over, 3 or 4 minutes, they called me in, sat down, and they said, we've had a lot of static about your interview, and we don't like it. The mayor has absolute control over my job. I'm appointed. He can hire me or fire me. And I said, well, just fire me. One of the councilmen popped up and said, oh, you're going to turn in your resignation. He's very nasty about it. I didn't appreciate that. And I said, that's not a problem. I'll quit. They couldn't believe I didn't know what was going on with Tad. Murders, rapists, thieves, they don't walk around with that printed on their forehead. And if they would kill somebody, you think maybe they might lie to you? I asked Tad when they disappeared. I sat him down and said, do you have anything to do with this? He said, no. I don't understand it other than people just have to blow things up. People, we have to have all the bloggers. We have all the people on the internet, media, stuff like this stuff that just have to come up with all this stuff. I actually had somebody come up to me and say, you bought a wood chipper. You guys could have run the body through that. No, I didn't. I bought a sawmill. It probably would even cut a human body up. See, it's all that crap like that that has blown this way up out of proportion. If I would have known, I'd have said something. I'd have done something. I honestly had no idea. I wanted to buy a sawmill. He come up to me and says, I want in business with you. I think it's a good deal. He put in 3 times as much money as I did. He walked up with the money. I went into business with him.
How much money did these people have? Were they really wealthy? Tad and Tiffany?
I don't know for sure. I know that there's a lot of farmland involved. A lot of farmland involved. And thousands of acres. Thousands of acres.
I mean, it's such an important point, Ashleigh. You might look at the mugshots and think one thing, but I mean, thousands of farm acres they own. These are powerful, powerful people involved in different businesses here in town. One last thing I want to tell you about Grandma Tiffany, of course, we heard that through the affidavit that she was in this anti-government group. Interesting, we've also confirmed, and I wrote this down through the chair of the Cimarron County Republican Party, that she was also the Republican chair in the county, which is interesting. We got a quote from the Republican Party, a man named Nathan Dahim. He said this is a very rural county. Could have been 3 people who showed up at the county convention and elected her. So basically trying to downplay the fact that she was, chairwoman of the Republican Party. But there's a lot of layers to these people, Ashleigh. I can tell you that.
Super weird if she's super anti-government with the God's misfits, if she's a sovereign citizen. It's weird that she would go and get herself elected as the chairman of the Cimarron County Republican Party. Oh, okay. Well,
she's on the hospital board too. Yeah, that too. Yeah.
I guess public administration isn't off the charts maybe for this sovereign citizens group. And again, I'm just guessing they're sovereign citizens. It sure sounds like they are. That the rules and the laws don't apply to them. That seems what the God's misfits seem to be. Excellent work again, Brian. Thank you for all of this tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ash.
Okay, so before today, most of the courtroom appearances that involved poor Veronica, the victim, and this grandma defendant, Tiffany, most of those appearances revolved around that custody dispute. The dispute involved Veronica and the children's father, that guy, Wrangler Rickman. And of course, Rickman is Grandma Tiffany's son. Earlier today, our show reached out to the attorney who represented that dad during the custody dispute. But the lawyer, Craig Box, that's his name, he no longer represents Wrangler Rickman. He does, however, now represent Wrangler's mom, Grandma Tiffany, who's a murder defendant. And he also represents Grandma Tiffany's boyfriend and co-defendant, Tad Cullum. We should note he represents the couple in an unrelated matter to these murders. But we asked this lawyer if he suspected the custody dispute might somehow be connected to this horrible crime. And he said it never dawned on him because, quote, while the custody case was contentious, it wasn't any more than a lot of custody cases that he handles. That's what he said. The lawyer also added that he hasn't spoken to either of these parties or Wrangler Rickman since the arrests. He mentioned as well that his firm has a lawsuit against that dad, Wrangler Rickman, over unpaid fees, but he still represents Rickman's mom and mom's boyfriend and says because the unpaid fees are unrelated to the older couple. And when asked if Wrangler Rickman could get custody of these children once he's released from his court-ordered rehab, that lawyer said this: unless Wrangler is proven to be an unfit father, he could get custody of the kids because in Oklahoma, the biological parents always get priority. You just think about that for a while. Coming up, could a doorbell camera not only prove that a woman on trial for murder did not do it, but that the authorities conspired to frame her? I'm going to speak with someone who earnestly believes that is the case. And he's important because he was authority himself. And you're going to see the video with your own eyes after a break. After 2 days of trying, the lawyers in the Karen Reed murder trial just outside of Boston, they got themselves 11 of the 16 jurors that they need. And if those people have not been following this case, they have no idea what they're in for. Karen Reed is the financial analyst and the college professor who's accused of murdering her boyfriend, John O'Keefe, a longtime Boston police officer. Happened back in January of 2022, and ever since then, the investigators have been building their case against her. But the doubters have been getting louder and louder. The investigators say that she backed over her boyfriend after a drunken argument and then left him to die in a snowbank outside of a house party. But Reed's defenders say the evidence does not add up. They say the victim's injuries aren't even the kind you get from vehicle impact, and they claim the investigators planted evidence at the scene. Evidence like fragments of a broken taillight from Reed's SUV. None of those defenders is more convinced than that of my next guest. Sean McDonough is a retired DEA supervisory special agent who's investigated this case on his own pretty much full time for a year now. He says he can prove that Karen Reed's taillight was completely intact after the alleged hit and run happened. Take a look at this video from the doorbell cam. It was taken at 5:03 a.m. And 5:03 a.m. is hours after Reed and O'Keefe parted ways. And you can see right there in the circle that Reed's taillight is right where it's supposed to be, on her Lexus SUV. I want to welcome to the program Sean McDonough. Sean, that video is sort of jaw-dropping. It's kind of like the Perry Mason moment, and I wonder if the prosecutors have it, and if they do, how do they explain it?
Actually, first of all, I'm so happy to be here, and thank you for covering this. I'm so happy you led with the first picture. The first picture is what the prosecution wants the jurors to believe. Look, that taillight looked like at 12:32 a.m. after John was allegedly hit by Karen Reed. In this video, which is 4.5 hours after Karen allegedly hit John, that light right there has absolutely no wires, no LEDs. All the red is completely gone, which means no red would be reflective, right? There would be nothing illuminating. At 5:03 to 5:08, you see her back in. She cracks the backup light onto Officer John O'Keefe's Traverse, which is behind there. See those tire tracks? She goes in at an angle, which means she definitely made contact with that side light that comes out 5 inches. We documented this. And see right there, that tire on John's car moves forward. It didn't go backwards. So the angle directs the motion of the vehicle when it got struck. So as that video continues on, if you keep going with that video a little bit more, it's completely intact. And this is how it all came about. The lead detective, Michael Proctor for the Mass State Police, this is how I found it. In his affidavit, he said the taillight, the right rear taillight, right side, was shattered and a large piece missing. And I said, wait a minute. The 2 witnesses told him that there was a crack. And we analyzed this back and forth, and we let the video play all the way through. I went to Lexus dealerships. They told me not only do they have, it's a polycarbonate plastic, one of the hardest plastics you can have. The law of physics, there you go, right there. See all that red? In the final picture where the prosecution is saying this is how it ends up, it's no way. So polycarbonate plastic, very hard. 6,500 pounds going into a 220-pound male human will topple him over. It will not crack up the taillight in 37-plus pieces. Absolutely impossible. Mistake number 1, they did not know this video existed when they did this crime scene later in the night. This video came about 2 days later. So when they made the decision... So again,
just listen, I've got only 30 seconds left, but I've got to ask you, you've been in this business a long time. How are the prosecutors going to explain this away? Because I guarantee you what you have, defense attorneys will use.
Oh, they have it all. They have that and more. I don't know how they intend to convince a jury of 12 that car hit John O'Keefe. There is no way.
Wow. Okay, so listen, we're only at the tip of the iceberg on this case. I'm going to have you back, Sean McDonough, because this case has gripped me, and we're only at jury selection. So I look forward to our next time together. Thank you for this, and thanks for sharing that all that video with us.
Thank you, Ashleigh, and thank you for covering this case. This is important. This is going to be the case to cover.
We're on it, and we hope you'll come back again. Sean McDonough joining us live, retired DEA supervisory special agent, done his own research on this case. Okay, still to come, the suspected Long Island serial killer back in court today, and his wife was right there by his side. After the break, her lawyer is going to join me live, but there was something else that happened in court. Prosecutors revealed how many electronic devices they found when they raided Heuermann's home and office. And here's a hint. It was in the hundreds. So while we go to break, do me a favor. I want you to count up the electronic devices all around your home. And don't forget the smart appliances. And let's see if you get anywhere close to the number that Rex Heuermann had. I'll have it for you next. Okay, I have a lot of digital devices in my house. I've got like an iPhone, an AirPods, an iPad. I've got 2 laptops. I've got several smart TVs, a Fire Stick, a Nest temperature control. My husband has about the same. My kids, I got what most kids have. I am sure I have missed a few, but I don't think my family's too far off the norm. I asked my husband to count. We're at 53. We have 53 connected devices in this home. Did you count yours? Because Rex Heuermann, the suspected Long Island serial killer, seems to have a hell of a lot more than I do. The police seized 422 devices from his home, his office, and from some of his employees. 422 electronic devices. That is a lot of digital stuff. And I work in TV. So that number might be the reason why the discovery dumps in his case are off the charts. And by the way, we got a good look today at the alleged killer, the suspected Gilgo Beach 4 killer today. But we had to look really fast. Heuermann was back in court for the first time since February, but the hearing lasted all of 5 minutes. That was it. Gone. As for the mountain of discovery, though, prosecutors say they handed over 2,500 pages today alone. And that relates to just one of Heuermann's 4 alleged victims. In more than a dozen other handoffs, all since February, they have turned over 7,000 pages related to, quote, other persons of interest. That's interesting. And they've given over 12 terabytes of data on nuclear DNA. That was transferred. And also 388 new leads were shared. Heuermann's lawyer took note of those, quote, other persons of interest, mainly because they include a former cop with the initials WH. WH. You might remember there was a belt with those initials that was wrapped around one of the victims, Maureen Brainerd Barnes. But the prosecutors say the belt implicates Heuermann, whose grandfather was William Heuermann, WH. The judge wants discovery transfers to be done by July. And interestingly today, again, Mrs. Rex Heuermann, Asa Ellerup, this is her, she showed up for court again today in a black Mercedes again today. But this time there was no camera crew in tow like there was last time. As a reminder, Asa Ellerup is in the process of divorcing Rex Heuermann. I'm joined now by Asa Ellerup's lawyer, Bob Macedonio. Bob, it's good to have you on the show again. Thank you so much for being here. Can I just ask you, I'm so perplexed when I see Asa showing up for court so dutifully and actually visiting him in prison. I think you mentioned last time once a week. Why all of this, stand by your man when she's divorcing him?
I'm not so much as stand by your man. I think it's trying to come to terms with where her life is at now. Honestly, she has nobody to speak to, and she's just having a difficult time processing everything that's out there. There are protective orders that are issued, so none of the evidence she's seen, her only knowledge of it is what's said in the courtroom, and frankly, with the news media reports, which none of us really have any information other than what's fed to us by the prosecutor.
So I have covered a lot of cases where, women will support their husbands through the process and give them the presumption of innocence, and the same for men. They'll support their wives and give them the presumption of innocence through these cases, but not while they're divorcing them. That's where I can't figure it out, and I'm hoping to get, you can help me get into her head there. Why, if she's giving him the presumption of innocence and showing up at these hearings and going to the jail, is she divorcing him?
She's divorcing him. Obviously, other issues are going on in the marriage, and information that she learned during the course of this investigation. There's other issues that are being developed, but she still does not believe that the man she was married to was capable of committing these horrendous crimes. She just doesn't seem as possible.
She believed it. Well, so there you go. Okay, so does she believe the parts of the investigation that say Rex was just flying through prostitutes year after year by the hundreds, but doesn't believe the part about the murder?
Well, I don't know about prostitutes by the hundreds, but there's obviously some information that she's gained during this investigation that is troublesome to the marriage, and she just has to, prepare for her life without Rex. That's what she's doing. But she also needs to get some kind of a closure, and it may take a year or two for this case to come to trial. We don't know. So who else could she talk to? See, there's no one else for her to talk to at this point. She's looked at in the grocery store. She's got those two kids. I'm always fascinated by, of course, if there's all that information and discovery that's just so troubling, not just for a marriage, but, there's got to be some suspicions about the case itself that she's still dutifully going to the prison to visit. Bob, will you come back again? There's still so much left to cover in this case. Oh, there's a ton left to cover. I have no idea what the 422 devices. I talked to her about that today and discussed it with numerous people. We don't know where that number is coming from. They each took cell phones, computers from the house, but nowhere near that number. So it's going to be interesting to see what all these devices are.
What they are. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm just like, boing. I mean, I counted ours, 53, in my household. And again, I work in electronic journalism, so I figure I'm on the high end. But Bob, thank you. Thank you so much. Come back again.
Have a good night. Bye.
Okay, you too. All right, coming up, I want to ask you this. How often do you just drive around aimlessly in the wee hours of the morning with your phone switched off? You see nobody sees you. Maybe you do that. There's certainly no law against it. But would you ever actually consider that a good alibi? Because Brian Kohberger does. Kohberger says he was, quote, just driving around when 4 students were butchered in a house near the University of Idaho at the exact same time, coincidentally. Pressed by the judge to cough up a few more details on that story, Kohberger did just that. And it happened just a short while ago. And when we come back, I'm going to share those details with you. And honestly, even as a journalist, I'm going to try to keep from laughing. I said I'll try. 25th hour to the day. Businesses are wondering, what should we do?
I'm thinking company-wide power nap.
Anything can change the world of work. From HR to payroll, ADP designs for the next anything.
So if I asked my teenager where he was last night, and he said to me, I was out driving around alone all night with my phone switched off. Didn't interact with a single person. Let's just say it would be the beginning of our conversation. It would not be the end of it. But that's exactly what Brian Kohberger told an Idaho court tonight by way of an alibi for the murders of 4 university students in their off-campus house. And I'm going to read you, word for word, some of the latest filing, but I want to get Richard Block in here with me. He's a criminal defense attorney, practices in Idaho. So, Richard, this happened late this evening, Eastern Time, and I want to read exactly what Ann Taylor filed with the court, because the judge pushed when they said they would file an alibi and said he was out driving around. The judge said, more details, please, and this is what Ann Taylor filed regarding Brian's habit of nighttime driving. Quote, after the school year began, Mr. Kohberger was busy with classes and work at Washington State University, and his running and hiking decreased, but did not stop. Instead, his nighttime drives increased. This is supported by data from Mr. Kohberger's phone, showing him in the countryside late at night and or in the early morning on several occasions. The phone data includes numerous photographs taken on several different late evenings and early mornings, including in November, depicting the night sky. Mr. Kohberger was out driving in the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022, as he often did, to hike and run and or see the moon and the stars. He drove through the area south of Pullman, Washington, west of Moscow, Idaho, including Wawahi Park. So, Richard Block, just what's your reaction to that as a lawyer?
So, obviously, it's not the strongest alibi we've ever heard, right? It's not, I was at the Dodgers game and here's the video. But it's not as weak as it sounds. You got to remember a couple things. First of all, the night sky in Idaho is terrific. There's reasons people come out here to go see the sky. We have craters of the moon out here. It's really great. And second, we've got a little bit of cooperation here. We have photos from his phone that they're telling us that they have, including him taking pictures of the night sky in November. So this is apparently something he does. The second part of that I think is really interesting is later in that filing is when they're talking about how much evidence they don't have because they don't have all the stuff off the phone, which may show more of this. So it's not as weak as it sounds right off the bat. It's not the greatest explanation.
You're so good at your job. You are really good at. If I ever murder someone, I'm hiring you. But I do want to say this. I've been out late at night a lot as well. And I'm not worried about someone calling me and interrupting my stargazing at 4 o'clock in the morning. So I don't see a need to turn my phone off exactly in the hour that those students were murdered. And one of the other propensities he has is to drive around ogling that house because they have plenty of digital evidence from his phone that pinged him at or around that house multiple times in the 3 to 4 months prior to those murders. Isn't that a little bit troublesome and sort of also diminishes this adorable story?
Well, we obviously don't know how strong all that evidence is, just like we don't know how strong the defense's evidence is. Most of the things that we've heard come from the police, which are incredibly sourced. They never tell the whole story. I don't know how many times I've seen an affidavit of probable cause that turned out to be misrepresentation after misrepresentation after misrepresentation. So let's take that. what they said with a grain of salt. That being said, these are problems in the case. These are things that the defense is going to have to deal with and have to try and explain. Doesn't mean they don't have an alibi, and it doesn't mean it's not important that they let the judge know about this, because there's a rule in Idaho that says you have to.
If I were a juror, I wouldn't want a grain of salt. I want a big old bag of salt if I heard that story in that courtroom. I would be mad. I would think about those 4 murdered victims, and I would think, is that all you've got? It's just the way people think. But you know what? Shoot for the moon, because they always say even if you miss, you'll end up in the stars. It's so good of you always to join me. Thank you so much, Richard Block.
Thanks for having me.
As always, we'll have you back. Okay, still to come, authorities are calling it a heroic act of self-preservation. But I call her Granny of the Year. An 85-year-old woman shoots a home invader dead, despite the fact that he handcuffed her to a chair and shot her first, at least 4 times. How did she do it? Granny, get your gun is next. When it comes to Idaho, not too much surprises me anymore. And if you watch every night, you know what I mean. But an Idaho woman named Christine Janian deserves her own special place in true crime history. About a month ago, Janian was asleep in her bed when authorities say a man named Derek Condon, that guy, dressed in a military jacket and black ski mask, broke into her home, hit her in the head, brandished a gun, and handcuffed her to a chair while demanding to know where she kept her valuables. And here's where I should pause and tell you that Christine Janian is 85 years old. And while her captor was looking for all of her stuff to steal, 85-year-old Janian managed to scoot her chair across the room to where she kept her .357 Magnum. And when the time was right, she shot the intruder twice, hitting him both times. But he shot back with his 9mm pistol, hitting an 85-year-old woman in the abdomen, in the leg, in the arm, and in the chest. Christine survived. The suspect did not. County prosecutor calls it, quote, one of the most heroic acts of self-preservation I have ever heard of, end quote. Moral of the story, and this kind of goes without saying, don't mess with Granny, because Granny got her gun, and she will F you up. That is all the time I have for tonight. You know what? Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Tomorrow, you got to be here again, because OJ's Bronco is for sale. And his death means that the price just got juiced to over $1 million. Will they get it?